I know it might be easy to miss, but if you watch very closely, you can pick up on some very subtle symbology of a white horse in this movie. Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and today we are continuing on with the Halloween franchise, this time with the 2009 entry of the Rob Zombie Halloween 2. Before I begin the review, I just want to remind everybody that if you've liked these Rotted reviews, please click like and subscribe. It would help me out a lot. Plus, you like this shirt? You like this mug? You can get yours now by clicking on one of the links in the description below for my merchandise storefront page. Moving on. This movie was... I took a lot of issue with it. There were a lot of paths that this movie walked down that I really didn't care for, and I really want to make it perfectly clear that all of them have to do with a plot and written script level. I also want to warn everybody that I will be going into some spoilers on this one. I don't know about like full spoiler mode, but let's just say spoiler-ish. You know what? Just warn everybody, spoiler mode. Fair warning on that one. So as far as this movie goes, what we have here is a film where the events of Halloween, the first movie, the first 2007 movie, took place, and we pick right up after it with Laurie being taken to the hospital, Michael Myers being taken in an ambulance, so on and so forth. And after the coroner's van, basically, it's carrying Michael Myers, crashes. He is not dead, and he escapes. And we fast forward to 1 or 2 years later, depending on which version you watch. Now, I will say that I watched both the theatrical release as well as more recently the unrated director's cut. And this review, I'm just going to kind of try and keep it, let's just say, version agnostic. And I'm going to be discussing some of the more general points in this one, and as far as specifics, if it has to do with one version or another, I will be pointing that out. But for the most part, I'm just going to be keeping it a little bit more pulled back in general. Fast forward 1 or 2 years later, depending, and we find Laurie in a state of vulnerability, to say the least. She is now living with Annie Brackett and Sheriff Lee Brackett, and is having some issues mentally. She's going to see a therapist, and she's taking a cavalcade of medication. She's basically battling some really strong PTSD, having nightmares, so on and so forth. She is damaged and scarred by the events of that night. And we also pick up on Michael Myers as he's been basically growing an epic beard and living out in a shack. Pretty much biding his time. And we are also picking back up with the Dr. Loomis character as he has become an author of exceptional fame and ego, as he's basically pitching his next book to be released on Halloween night, and he's doing his press tour of it. Things start really kicking off when Michael Myers is starting to continue having visions of his mother, Deborah Myers, and the events basically kick off with him being instigated into a situation where he wants to go and find his little baby sister again. And in doing so, starts his rampage there. So while Laurie is trying to determine, what's real, what's not, hashing things out in her head, and also, dealing with a very, very high level of paranoia, the events that she is paranoid about are starting to unfold as Michael Myers gets closer to her. And the movie really takes off from there. So fundamental issues that I had with this from a plot and from a written script level are many. First of all, subtlety. Subtlety in symbology. This movie has a white horse throughout it. And it's not subtle about it, to say the least. Even going so far as to have an opening title crawl kind of, showing, what a white horse is symbolizing in the world of psychosis. And then having a white horse prevalent physically through the imagery throughout the film. Typically, wherever Deborah Myers is, there is also the young Michael Myers and a white horse. This was a tough one for me. First of all, okay, symbology in films. You have subtle ones, like the oranges in The Godfather, or the X's in The Departed, or the heat in 12 Angry Men. Those levels of symbology really work well to subconsciously bring out elements of the plot and have a sense of foreboding or nuance that brings the audiences into the room even further. You have not so subtle imagery in movies like a lot of Christ symbology really kind of just pounds it, knocks it in our head with a hammer. The Matrix, Man of Steel, and so on and so forth. So there's not so subtle imagery examples there. And then there's just completely beating us over the head until we're bloodied and broken, like Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. We get it. It's a white horse. You've told us word for word exactly what it means. You have a situation in the director's cut where there's an ink blot, big painting on the wall about that Laurie sees as a white horse. It's just in almost every darn scene that Michael Myers envisions his mother in. It's everywhere, and it would have been so much better to have it way more subtle than that. To not have an explanation, to not have it show up in every scene, to basically have it in moments of critical character development. That would have been a lot better. So just the fundamental written plot there of the symbology injected within the film, it was way too prevalent. As far as the Dr. Loomis character goes, I really felt like they did him a massive disservice. By turning him into such an egomaniac and such an a-hole, I think that they really did a big disservice to the character and all the incarnations played previously, including the 2007 Malcolm McDowell version, as well as, unfortunately, I have to say, it really cast a shadow on the whole Donald Pleasence performance. This is a situation where, Donald Pleasence, he did kind of go off the rails for a little bit, but mostly it was in his fervor for finding the Michael Myers character. He always knew, that was the thing, he always knew that he was never dead. And everybody else said Michael Myers is dead, Dr. Loomis was always the one saying, no, he's not, he's just evil, and evil finds a way. And in this one, he is basically the one saying that he's dead. Everybody stopped saying that he's alive. Fine, a body was never found, but he's dead. Just trust me. And I know that this is a remake. I know that this is a reboot of the whole thing, and that there's no bridge between the Donald Pleasence Dr. Loomis and the Malcolm McDowell Dr. Loomis. I get that, but at the same time, there is a sort of reverence that should be paid to some sort of character traits. You don't remake Miracle on 34th Street and then turn Kris Kringle's character into Billy Bob Thornton's Bad Santa. You don't take a dump on a well-established, lovable, grandpa-like character like Donald Pleasence portrayed in the Dr. Loomis performance. And it just felt like an absolute slap in the face to Halloween fans. That was one of the things that made Halloween great, was the fact that you had this Ahab-like character, that you had this Dr. Loomis character, that when everything was trying to switch things up and retcon and say that this movie didn't exist, so we're going to pick up back at this one, and this movie didn't exist, so we're going to pick up back at this one, we always, third movie aside, we always had Dr. Loomis and we always had Donald Pleasence. And even if he went off the rails, his heart was in the right place, and he always cared for the protagonist. He always cared for Laurie Strode. He always cared for the Jamie character. He always cared in general. He always wanted the best for the people of Haddonfield and to stop the evil of Michael Myers. And this was just a complete 180 shift. He only cared, in this movie, he only cared about himself. He didn't care about Michael Myers. He made that perfectly clear. As far as any sort of personal responsibility towards the care of his patient. Never before has a failure been so well advertised, but he failed Michael Myers. He really did. I mean, maybe it was inevitable, maybe it was completely insurmountable, but regardless, this was a child that was put under his care that had mental disorders, and he was a psychologist, and he did not help. He failed in his endeavors with Michael Myers, and in that failure, people died. And he capitalizes on it. And when he's called out on it, all he does is get defensive and try to sell more books. This was an abhorrent character. This was a terrible character. And that really felt like a slap in the face to something that had previously been the linchpin of the series. I had, obviously, some pretty big issues with this one. Moving on. Again, shifting of character focuses. This wasn't quite as bad as the first film as far as trying to nail down the perspective of the protagonist and who we're supposed to latch onto. We're still not given a very singular, clear protagonist in this one, but it is fairly evenly divided between being a Laurie Strode movie and being a Michael Myers movie. The one thing that I wish it was that it wasn't was a Halloween movie. But regardless, we had the Michael Myers character as he's, envisioning his mother, envisioning his younger self, envisioning the white horse, and going on his rampage. And then we had the Laurie Strode character that is struggling with her own psychosis as she is getting worse and worse and diving deeper and deeper into her own psychotic self until finally they meet. Now, this would be, I would say, a good path to go down if it weren't if it weren't a Michael Myers movie. Here's what I mean by that is if you were to have two characters have equal screen time that were separate from one another, geographically, story-wise, separate from one another, and you had one that had given in to its violent tendencies and struggled with them, and then you had one that was inherently good but struggled with violent psychosis trying to take her over. And you had them deal with those two levels as they slowly geographically get closer and closer and closer until by the climax of the movie they meet and they either destroy or help one another or some combination thereof. But basically you wind up with, the big climax of the film with the two characters struggling with their black and white selves, basically, knocking heads at that point. And that would have worked, except I don't think anybody that is a Halloween or Michael Myers fan wants to see him struggling with his evil. So as far as giving them equal screen time and as far as them having their own psychosis and then, doing that geographical thing that this movie did, we don't see him struggle with it. But in that lack of struggle, I fail to see exactly what the point was of having the equal screen time of the protagonist. What was the point of having so much Michael Myers and so much internal in the visions that he had and so on, and his mother talking to him. And I just don't see the point of having the character be so prevalent outside of just being a killing machine. We really should have either had the duality, which we shouldn't have because that would have worked in almost any other movie except a Michael Myers movie, or we should have had it focus strictly on the Laurie Strode character and her struggles and her trying to get along with Annie Brackett and her father as things go on. And then Michael Myers would just basically be this external element that raises hell and tries to find her. Period. No white horse, no mother, end of story. So the shifting of the character focuses was just, it didn't work. It didn't work for me. So from a plot level, those were the issues that I had. And from a core conceptual level, that's pretty big. That's a lot of the movie. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up all the scores here. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And as you can see, I did not care at all for this plot. It wasn't a complete zero, but as a Halloween movie, even a Michael Myers movie, and certainly as a Laurie Strode movie, I don't think it really worked. It was just way too divided, it was way too broken up, and it just didn't feel at all like a Halloween movie. It felt like something else. It felt like a Rob Zombie movie. It felt like Rob Zombie wanting to take the characters that he created in the remake and then bring them further into his world and pull them more out of Haddonfield. And that just felt like the total wrong direction to me. And that obviously impacted the intent a significant amount. If I don't like the core storyline of a movie, then there's not a whole lot that's going to be able to save it from there. There's everything about the tension, the entertainment, the fun, the glee of watching the kills, the sympathy of watching the characters. It just kind of starts to go out the window. But I do want to make a point of saying that as far as the acting and the technical skills of this movie goes, this was actually, I think, even better than the 2007 release. The acting in this movie was actually pretty exceptional, and I want to give a lot of credit here and be very clear about this, that the increased amount of screen time given to the Brad Dourif, Sheriff Lee Brackett character, he was given much more screen time in this movie than he was in the 2007 original remake, and I think that he sold the performance incredibly well. And especially in the director's cut, because there is a portion of his scenes that is more emotionally impactful, and in the director's cut, they do last a bit longer. And he nails it. I really can't give enough props, kudos, whatever you want to call it, to Brad Dourif for his portrayal of the sheriff in this one. It was an exceptional, standout performance. And as far as selling the jerk, egotistical character goes, as much as I didn't like the character, I have to give a big tip of my hat to Malcolm McDowell for selling that aspect of the character. He really did it fantastically. That's me really trying to be very objective and saying, good acting job, I just hated you. And another standout performance of this one was Danielle Harris coming back as the Annie Brackett character, playing off of Laurie Strode. She really... It felt very heartbreaking, honestly. You know, she went through the same slasher stuff that Laurie Strode did, and she is still trying to be the strength. She is trying to be the foundational rock that Laurie can rely on. And they butt heads. They live together. They're almost sisters in that regard. So, of course, they butt heads. But as Laurie's struggling, Annie is struggling to help her while also managing her own stuff and also managing her relationship with her father. And Danielle Harris really sold the performance very well. I was glad to see her back in a Halloween series. I honestly wish that she had been the Laurie Strode character or been, I don't know about reprising. I don't know. I'm glad that she got the screen time that she did. I'm glad that she was back in the Halloween series, and I'll just leave it at that. I think she did a very good job in this one. And as far as the technical stuff goes here, I think the camera work was really good. The cinematography, the score, the editing even was actually pretty spot on. And as far as the kills go, I thought that they were very visceral. They were sold extraordinarily well by the practical effects department. And I really don't have a whole lot of issues on a technical level with this movie. So to summarize, this movie for me was a massive failure, but it wasn't on anything regarding the acting performances or the technical abilities of the film. It was just coming right down to the script, which honestly should have been just crumpled up and thrown away. I heard that Rob Zombie said when he made the 2007 original remake that he didn't want to come back. He didn't want to do a sequel. He would never do a sequel. But then he heard that the studio was going forward with one anyway. And he said, okay, fine, I'm going to go ahead and step in and I'm going to do this because I don't want to see anybody ruining it. And in my opinion, he stepped in and he ruined it. And I just think that that's terribly unfortunate. So that's a total score of 44 out of 100 points. Not the worst film of the series at all. But certainly not one that I would say I recommend outside of people just making their way through the franchise. So that should about do it. That's my review of the 2009 Rob Zombie Halloween 2. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, my Patreon and my merchandise storefront links are below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.